Welcome back, everybody. 14 after the hour, and time for us to go behind the headlines. Today's headline is an opinion piece called What Voters Should Know About Measure 91, Guest Opinion. The guest opinion is written by Norm Frink, a retired Chief Deputy District Attorney for Multnomah County, right here, and Mark McDonnell, the retired Senior Deputy District Attorney for Multnomah County. They came out early on this year in opposition to marijuana legalization, so this is no surprise to hear from these guys. What is surprising is to hear some of the lies that they promulgate in this opinion piece. We'll tackle them for you right now. They say, as voters are deciding, we believe they should have the type of information that has not been presented by the 30-second spots that dominate television. Here are the things that Measure 91 does not do. Unlike Washington State's legalization measure, Measure 91 does not make changes in the driving under the influence law to address driving under the influence of marijuana, nor does it provide additional funding for law enforcement and particularly the state crime lab in this critical area. That's an outright falsehood. First of all, Oregon's Measure 91 designates or mandates that the Oregon Liquor Control Commission study marijuana impaired driving and recommend to legislators any change that needs to be made. We can't study or know what the scientific value of marijuana impaired driving is until we get it legal and we direct our government to study it. And as far as funding for law enforcement, hell yes, it gives funding for law enforcement, 35%, 20% of that to the state police, 15% to city and county cops, and a large proportion of that to hire and train more drug recognition experts. They continue by saying, there is no requirement for a person to obtain a permit, keep records, account for, or collect taxes for private marijuana grows and sales. Well, first of all, a private grow is a private grow. That's exactly the way it's treated in Colorado. And no sales are allowed from your private grow. There are no private sales. You have to be a licensed retailer or wholesaler in order to sell marijuana in Oregon under Measure 91. It's another outright lie. They also say, there's no special funding or educational plan for addressing the problem of expanded marijuana exposure to minors. Again, Measure 91 designates 25% of its tax resources to drug prevention and treatment, particularly how to prevent teens from getting their hands on marijuana and better educational campaigns. They also say that there's far too much marijuana. Unlike the Washington State statute, Measure 91 would allow private citizens to possess up to 8 ounces of marijuana, 4 mature plants, 16 ounces of homemade marijuana products in solid form, and 72 ounces in liquid form. Look, guys, the amounts that Measure 91 allows for public possession, for edibles, and for tinctures are exactly the same as Washington State, and the amounts they allow for home possession, plant cultivation, and concentrates are lower than what they are in Colorado. They also continue with the worry about marijuana potency. They say because the potency of marijuana has increased exponentially in recent years, exponentially would mean a curve that approaches infinity, and that is not at all true. It's maybe raised 2 to 3 times over the past 3 decades, but whatever. I don't expect them to be mathematicians. Measure 91 says, what is a private marijuana grower to do with all that excess marijuana? Measure 91 allows private citizens to sell up to 1 ounce of usable marijuana and 16 ounces of homemade marijuana products in solid form and 72 ounces in liquid form. That's absolutely untrue. Measure 91 does not allow private citizens to sell marijuana. You will have to be a licensed retailer or wholesaler under the regulations of the Oregon Liquor Control Commission. Another outright lie about Measure 91. And then they finish by saying, Colorado's governor was asked recently what he would say to those in other states that are considering legalizing marijuana. His answer was that it would be reckless before we see what the consequences are there. And yet, Governor Hickenlooper walked back those comments the very next day. Funny how nobody ever refers to that part. This is nothing but these DAs throwing every scare they can out and hoping that some of them will stick. The scare about what about the children, what about the minors, they continually forget to mention that the Oregon Liquor Control Commission will be empowered to prohibit any advertising or marketing to children. They continue with these scares about the marijuana-infused edibles, despite the fact that since 1996, there has been legalized marijuana in this country in the form of medical marijuana in California, which our opponents keep saying is Wild West, wide open. Anybody can get it. You'd have thought if somebody was going to give out a marijuana-infused treat on Halloween, it would have happened by now since 1996, since 18 years, since we now have 23 medical marijuana states. But just like the razor blades in the Snickers bar or the poisoned apples, we have yet to see a single verifiable case of this ever happening in history. The scaremongering has got to stop. People need to be rational and think about this. Marijuana is here in the state of Oregon. It will never go anywhere. There are 108,000 of us 21 years and older who are using marijuana 2 out of 3 days or more. 108,000 of us. There are 314,000 of us that are using marijuana every month, and 436,000 of us that are using marijuana every year. 436,000 Oregonians who will get their marijuana from somewhere. They'll get it from a criminal, they'll cheat the medical marijuana program, or they'll drive across the river to Vancouver and get it. And we've seen that Washington State's #1 and #2 best-selling pot shops are in Vancouver. Why should our tax money cross the river? Vote yes on Measure 91. It's about time.